welcome on my side for this paper session called Strengthening External Engagement. So for those of you who don't know me, I am Geneviève Lefort. I am the Vice-Rector for Quality at the University of Applied Sciences and Arts of Western Switzerland. I happen to be also in the EQAF program committee, so that's why I have the pleasure to chair this paper session. So we have two papers for this session and two speakers, which you see on the screen. So we have Nicole Lassahn from France and Eltjo Bazen from the Netherlands. And we will start with you, Nicole. You're a project manager for international monitoring and management support, external and international affairs at the Université Grenoble Alpes. You have 10 minutes for a presentation. Then after that, we'll have a good 15 minutes for question and answers and discussions before we pass the floor to Eltjo. So Nicole, you start and I give you the floor.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here. This is the first time I've been at the EQAF, so it's been really nice to see all of the other sessions and the papers and what's happening. Let's talk about what's happening in Grenoble. So Grenoble used to have 3 universities, and in 2016, those 3 universities merged to make one big university, the Université Grenoble Alpes, which is obviously a sort of a young university in that way. And we did this for a variety of reasons. France is pushing, there are a lot of mergers in France right now. France is very invested in merging its universities in order to increase international visibility, and particularly via the rankings, sorry about the cat, particularly via the rankings and the Shanghai rankings. And they've incentivized that with some national funding called the EDEX funding, which we did in fact acquire. And after the merger happened, we're a much bigger university, we have more staff, and we were able to do a couple of things to enhance quality and data-driven decision-making, one of which was just making a database in 2017. We hired a database administrator who built a little database called Operateur. It has all of our external institutional relationships in it. And then in January of 2020, there was also an administrative service unit created within international and external affairs for monitoring and management support. And that's where I work now. And so what we found is that while obviously having a lot of data is really, really helpful, if you want to make data-driven decisions, I think a room full of quality assurance people understand the value of having reliable information. It's not sufficient to get that done. And so if people have questions about the database and how it got built and what it's made out of, feel free to ask that. But today, I wanted to talk about some of the other things that we've also found we need to do to build trust and enhance decision-making and performance. So I'm going to talk today about some of our strategies for communicating with our various stakeholders. And I talk about what has gone well. I'm going to talk about some of the things that still need some attention. So when we talk to our stakeholders, we use certain principles and we try to use them across the board, no matter what the situation. First, with respect to the data themselves, all of our external relationships are in the database. We sort them and we categorize them, but we don't rank them. We don't say this relationship is more important than that relationship. We say these are the relationships, and users can make decisions themselves about what's important to them. And then when we provide information and when we provide analyses of that information, we stay as far as possible neutral and factual, and we do not share our personal opinions about that, what we think you should do. And that includes even which questions the users ask. We don't say, oh, we think you should look at this question or this problem. People come to us and they have questions and problems, or we know that they're working on a project, and we try to inform those decisions as best we can in a neutral way. And this is a principle that we try to apply even when we're talking about qualitative information, which is obviously a little bit more challenging because it's qualitative. And I'm actually the one who does a lot of that work, so that's been a particular learning curve for me. But by relying on the extant literature for best practices and what other people are doing and citing it, we try to arrive again at the same kind of neutral outlook and attitude. And then we also do a couple of things to make sure that the department is seen as a resource, an internal resource for people. One of which is to create a document that says, these are the services we offer. It's called an offre de service, and to give it to our colleagues. So we do this, we do this, we do this. This is the email address that you can make a request. Feel free to contact us anytime, so that people know that we exist and they know specifically what we do. And then when requests do come in, if they are in any way feasible or reasonable or appropriate, we try to say yes to them, because what we don't want is to get a reputation as a unit that's too busy to help, can't help, doesn't know how to do stuff. We want a reputation as a service unit that is available and helpful and can work with you on your choice of priority or project. And in a lot of ways, it works really well. Just with respect to the data, obviously, we have a more accurate view of what our external relationships actually are. I think there's a lot of people have probably experienced this in their own institutions. There's a lot of imagining that our principal relationships are X, Y, and Z. And sometimes when you look at the actual data, it's not the case. So we have accurate information and we can start from there. We're actually doing pretty well presenting that information in a neutral way. And that is very useful, actually. That works really well, much better than trying to offer an opinion. And then the database also opens up the possibility of using other kinds of tools. So one example of this, we have a visualization tool, which is a map of the world with our partnerships on it. And that map is it's now on our public website and anyone can look at it. They can be a student, they can be a partner, they can be a potential student, they can be a random French taxpayer who wants to know where the public money is going in the university. They can look at the partnerships map on the website and it's updated from information that's in that database. And then obviously having reliable data over the course of several years allows for certain types of comparisons. So you can look and see how things have changed from one year to the next year, can compare two academic departments, we can compare two different countries and see what activities look like in those different frameworks. And then finally, we've just started to be able to import and include external frameworks as well. Especially, there's some very good and very reliable information from organizations like the OECD and UNESCO that allow you to put your information into a kind of larger context, and that helps make it a little bit more meaningful. And this is also something that appears on our projects that we still need to work on because it's really in process. I think there's a lot more work we could do to get those frameworks up and running and to have more sophisticated analyses that make use of them, but it is started. And then some of the other things that are still issues for us at the university, just as an institution, we don't really have a culture of transparency and openness. And I mean, it's an open question what to do about that. I think it's something you work on little by little, but this manifests in various ways. One of which is a reluctance to share information even internally, which is difficult to manage, particularly in something like international relations or local relations, where we really need information from across the university and we need people to be willing to share it with us. If we do want to share information or make comparisons externally, also, like all universities, we have a wide variety of types of institutional relationship. A municipal government is nothing like a partner university, and that's nothing like an employer. So those kind of comparisons are obviously difficult to manage or even impossible to do. And as an institution, the university does not have a standard policy for collecting data or storing data or harmonizing data. And so we just do what we think will work. I mentioned already, we still don't have as many kind of meaningful frameworks for comparison as I would really like. And then the last thing that we have a lot of issues with is trying to get stable staffing, and in particular for database administration, that kind of highly technical, very skilled position. We're not always able to make the case unless you already have a database administrator. You can't show the kind of work that only a database administrator can do. So you need to have one to show why you need one, so that you can make the case that you need to hire one. And I think you can get into a little bit of a vicious circle with that as well. I think what I'm going to do is stop there, but leave this slide up. So far it's been a little abstract, so I did prepare a slide with some examples of projects that we've worked on over the last couple of years. I think I'll just pop it up, and then we can, if people have questions about that, they can ask that. If people have other questions about other things, obviously, they can ask those as well. And thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Nicole. I guess the first question I have is, what's the name of your cat?
Her name is Edie.
Okay, she's great for the stress test, right?
Incredibly interested in quality enhancement. She's very excited.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot for your presentation. Actually, we do have, before we maybe go to either some concrete examples or the questions, we do have a little poll for you guys in the audience. So, I mean, something that was quite interesting in Nicole's presentation was this lack of trust, maybe, or reluctance to share data. So the first question is, do you trust the management to make the good use of the data produced internally? I mean, many of us, of course, obviously, are working with data, sometimes producing data. If you're part yourself of the management, of course, maybe you wonder if the level above you is doing a good use of the data that you're producing. So we always have that same question, and it's quite interesting to see that it's half-half, right?
I'm unsurprised, actually, that a lot of people, I think this is a very common attitude. This is certainly an attitude that I have and fight against.
Okay.
Actually, preparing this presentation and thinking about this poll question has really been interesting for me, because I think, I mean, we talk about building trust, and I talked a lot about how we want people to trust us. And it really made me think, like, if I don't trust management to use the data we provide properly, like, it's not maybe reasonable for me to expect them to trust us to help them make decisions. And that's maybe something I need to work on, that we need to work on as a unit.
Okay. Maybe we can stop this point and then go to the next one, since they are quite, I mean, the majority is either no or I'm not sure. Yeah. So it would be interesting to know from you guys in the audience, then, if not, or if you're not sure, then why? I mean, there are different possibilities. And the lack of quality of data, of course, is one thing. Fear of what data may show, including comparing to others, lack of contextualization, irrelevant or inappropriate use, none of the above. Lack of quality, of course, I mean, we know that's a huge challenge. And the fear of what data may show, well, actually, you know, numbers don't lie. So sometimes it's indeed something to, you know, to give some numbers about your institution, your activity, or whatever. Lack of contextualization may be a problem indeed. Data by itself, what does it say if you don't understand the context? Of course, the meaning of the data could be completely different. You mentioned in your paper irrelevant or inappropriate use, that it was more useful for marketing and not for strategic hearing, for example.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you colleagues in the audience want to take some few more seconds to reflect on that.
Well, this is interesting. Lack of contextualization seems to be the big winner.
Yeah.
That's the thing, because that's one of the big things we want to work on this year is trying to build a little bit more of that, so that sort of confirms That's good.
Okay, maybe we can close this poll, and thanks for taking part. About this lack of contextualization, since it's the big winner, as you say, can you develop a little bit, or maybe say in your institution, because you were talking about the reluctance of the people to share the data. What is, in your sense, the main reason in your institution?
I think part of the problem that we have is specific to us, and it's kind of a lag effect of the merger. That, I mean, I personally went from a department that had 9 people in it to a department that now has over 40, maybe even 50 people if you count all of our like interns and temporary workers. There are people, I don't know their names in my department. And that, I think, is a shared experience. And I think at the time of the merger that there were certain administrative structures that were built specifically to enable communications, but those structures are very formal and they tend to happen at an extremely high level. So it's like the vice president will meet with the vice president, or the executive director will meet with the executive director, and they'll set an agenda, and that's good. But just people who are working in operations never see their colleagues outside of their home unit. And sometimes they don't even see all of the colleagues in their home unit. And I think there's a visceral, if we contact them and say, hey, can we have this information? I think there's often a visceral response that we are an external population. Even though technically we're not, we all work for the same institution. But in terms of people's sense of like what team they play for, I think they play for, like, I work in the academics department, I work in research services, I work in accounting. That's internal. And I think that causes some issues. And I think having the opportunity to work on projects, specific questions, specific concrete projects with people from outside your department really helps with that problem a lot. Yeah.
There is a question about the different views, or from the different stakeholders. And that question, I read it to you. Sometimes stakeholders may have different and even conflicting interests. So how would you detect it in data collection, and how would you address it?
I think we don't really try to address it. I think stakeholders do have different interests. I think it's a big institution. Most universities are big institutions, and people do have differing interests. The way I address it, and I think the way that our unit addresses it, is to say it's not our job to decide that kind of thing, which of these, it's a contentious decision, and it's not our job to make the contentious decision. It's our job to find as much relevant information to inform the contentious decision as possible, so that the person making the decision has the best opportunity to make a good decision. But it's really their job to balance stakeholder needs or other kinds of information. And we might have data about stakeholder needs. I mean, I can imagine a situation where one of the stakeholders is a student population, and you might have data about what the students want, but then you might also have information about what faculty time constraints we have, or physical plant constraints we have, and those things. We just say, here's the stuff. I guess.
Okay. And what about the transparency? There is also a question about that. What are the possibilities or strategies for having more information transparency?
I think, well, one way is to be trustworthy about the information. Like you want to make sure to do a good job. Another thing I think is to model the behavior you want to see. We try to be transparent. We try to resist that impulse to say like, "Ooh, this is a sensitive issue and we're not going to share." And to say like, here's a resource. I want to share it as broadly as possible to everyone I can think of who might benefit from it. I don't want to spam people's inboxes, but like, or here's the information that's relevant to this question, and it's open to everyone. So for now, our perimeter is really within the International and External Affairs Office, and we have tools like a shared server where we save things. And every month, I'll just stock resources by month about what's come out in higher education news and things that are happening and tools that are, and anyone can look at it. And I think people are maybe more likely to be transparent with you if you are willing to share first. I think it helps to go first in general. questions.
And I do have, there's so many questions, so many dimensions that we could discuss, but I do have, it's also a personal, a personal interest in my institution. And I know somebody out there in the audience who will be smiling when I ask the question, but how do you manage with the quality of the data? You just said that many of the people, it's all open and you can have access to the data and stuff. You said in your presentation or maybe in your paper when you submit it, but that you have different information system. Where, it's a big university after the merge, and of course it's not all. There is a lot of heterogeneity. So how do you make sure, or what do you do so that the people who access the data know that the data is reliable and they can trust it? Do you have like a quality management system for the data itself? What do you do? How does it work?
Okay. We have a variety. So the big problem, as you mentioned, is, I think this is true of all institutions. You have information sitting around and it's not really data yet. It's the accounting people have accounting software. They use it to do their day-to-day work. They need to get their job done and go home and have a nice life. The human resources people have human resources data. The research management people have resource management data. And so you have to find it and somehow get it concatenated and aggregated together. And the strategies for doing that sort of depend on the data themselves. I think one really helpful thing, if there's any possibility of importing an external norm and using it in your data tables, I would say do it. So a really sort of base level example is countries. We don't want to be in the business of deciding who is and who is not a country. And we don't want to have to decide to use the English name, to use the French name, to use the name the country uses for itself, which maybe isn't even in like the same alphanumeric character system. We just use the ISO 3-letter code and we don't worry about it. Someone else makes that decision. That's taken care of. Our database administrator this week is importing GRID. It's, what is it? Global Research ID numbers.
Okay, so what? Of course, we don't have the time to get too much into details. But what you're saying is, you have to have, and if it comes from outside because it's already set, even better. But you need to have some common practices, understanding, so that the people when they enter the data, they do it the same way. But still, at some point, you have probably to give some information to the public.
Oh yeah,
that the data indeed is reliable because A, B, C, D. Because of those reasons, the data is reliable.
Yeah. And also, sometimes it's not reliable. That we know, for example, that our student totals for the 2016-2017 year are wrong. Mm-hmm. We don't know how to fix that, but we can say to people, don't include this in year-to-year comparisons because we know that that's not the right number. Okay. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm pressing you, but we have Eltjo waiting behind. But then we still have a couple of minutes. Maybe something on the not on the data and the technicalities and all that and the trust and all that stuff, but more on the topic. External stakeholders and stuff. So. There is that question also for you. Does the database that you have help you to evaluate the regional impact that you do? So maybe going a little bit, but only 2 minutes into the contenu.
It does help, actually. We recently were asked. So we have a satellite campus in Valence, which is another city in southeast France. And we were asked to help evaluate the impact specifically of the Valence campus and then of the university in general. And the impact report was done by an external agency, but using data that, in fact, much of which came from our database. There you see a lot of our data from what are called stage. They're like work placements and internships. There's a database called BStage that manages that, and there's an immense amount of information about employment and that kind of thing. that helps evaluate impact. There are things like human resources data, where employees live, where they work, if they're moving from one campus to another, and you can make some estimates. Again, we didn't do the modeling, but you can make some estimates about impact economically via employment. So yeah, absolutely, it's helpful for that kind of project. Yeah.
Okay. Great, thanks a lot. There are some questions that were not answered. I don't know if you have the possibility, probably yes, I don't know, maybe to answer them at some point in written form, maybe if you want to,
if people have questions and they want to send them to me afterwards, I'm definitely open to that. And if you have technical questions about the data, I can even bounce them to our database administrator, who maybe more technical answers than I will. So feel free to do that. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks a lot. And now I invite Eltjo to come to the screen with me. Hello, hello. So you're from the Netherlands. You are Senior Quality Advisor, Eltjo, at the University of Applied Sciences in Utrecht in the Netherlands. So same thing, you're going to have about 10 minutes for your presentation, and then we will also have about 15 minutes for discussion afterwards. So Eltjo, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. My name is Eltjo Bazen. I'm working in the University of Applied Sciences in Utrecht, the Netherlands, shortly HU. And I want to talk a bit about the bench learning project we did together with our Finnish colleagues of the Turku University of Applied Sciences. And the theme there was managing societal engagement and impact. This presentation, I'll talk a bit about the background, about what bench learning is, our plans, our reality, our experiences, the evaluation and effects of the bench learning trajectory, and of course we'll have a time for questions and some dialogue. A bit about the background. So it is coming from Finland, this idea in the Finnish audit framework adopted by the FINEC, the Finnish Education Evaluation Center. They included in their audit framework the concept of bench learning that all institutions had to carry out. So our Turku colleagues, they were of course under this framework. So they asked my institution, because we are together in the consortium of applied research and professional education, CARPE. So this is a consortium or a network consisting of 6 or 7 University of Applied Science all through Europe, where we are working together for quite some years now. And the theme we chose, there were multiple themes to choose from. The theme we chose, as I already said, was managing societal engagement and impact. But let's first ask you a question. What do you think when you hear the term bench learning? And I'm asking this because, to me, when the Turku people approached me, I never heard of it. So I'm interested to see what your thinking was. So definitely my initial response was the first. I see people thinking about forms of learning, forms of benchmarking, and the last, which is too long to say shortly. First, about the last one, I guess if your answer is indeed a communal way of working, we're learning from another community, and so on, if that is truly your answer, then either you work in a FINEC or are from a Finnish institution, or you're just basically cheating and thinking it must be this because this is the longest one. Thanks for the poll. Let's go on. What it is not some form of benchmarking. Benchmarking is, of course, very close to this, but the point of benchmarking is not so much the learning part, but it is seeing where you are in relation to others. And in bench learning, it's very explicit to have to be directed at learning. So you use someone else, another community, and you are actively working together to learn. So it's really a collective learning on both ways, from each other and with each other. So this all sounds very informal, in a way it is, because it's part of the audit framework. There, of course, has to be a report in the end with lessons learned, which is a collective report as well. Then our plans, when we originally joined forces, we made a small preparatory committee from Finnish and Dutch people, and our plans were, in a way, very traditional: to have a site visit with a small committee from one place, going to the other, there have some presentations on what they were doing in managing their societal engagement and impact, and have dialogue about it, learn things, and disseminate those lessons at home, take them home. Then have a return visit the other way, and then in the end come up with a joint report. Well, that was a very traditional plan, but of course reality didn't cooperate. So some things had to change. We had to, of course, we couldn't visit each other, therefore we did it online. Now this had a couple of consequences. So first of all, because we were online, we were not limited anymore to small groups, being as small groups. We don't want to travel with 20 or 30 people and fly to the other side of Europe, of course, or halfway through Europe. But online, that doesn't matter. On the other hand, the time is limited. And somehow this works because if you're actually there, then it's kind of logical that people have time for you, and you have time for people that are visiting you. So you just wipe clean your agenda. If it's online, that doesn't work. You have an hour, maybe two, but then there's so much other online meetings, and somehow the time is more limited. So we solve this by giving people more preparatory work to make those limited time, the frames, those limited hours, very effective, or as effective as possible. So our solutions were, we made in the end 2 online meetings with roughly 18 people per person, per institution. And we clustered those in 4 domain subgroups. So we had a group of business, one of engineering, one healthcare and well-being, and one arts and media. And in those subgroups, there was combined people coming from an education background, coming from a research background, and some supporting staff as well, here and there. And as said, we gave them homework in preparation. The first meeting was directed at sharing good practices, just telling each other what the good practices in your own institution were, in your domain. The second institution was directed at delving deeper. So good practices from the first meeting were chosen as the most promising one for the other institution. And then we delved deeper into the success factors and risks that were connected with those good practices. And in both meetings, we had centralized wrap-ups with board members involved, which I think was important as well, that it was clearly showed that this was seen as important. So the experiences of both the participants and the boards were very positive. And as you can see, for me and my colleagues in the preparatory group or groups, it was positive. It was not very positive, but it was positive. And why it was not very positive was mostly because the process took really quite some time and effort. It was a lot of organization. That was, of course, partially due to the changing pandemic reality that changed all our ideas and plans. But as well, it is quite a task to organize this, to think on how to what actually the goals are, how to realize those. The planning, of course, of roughly 40 people for 2 meetings is well, not the easiest task. Making the homework assignments in the best way possible, that it wouldn't take too much time of the participants, but it would be effective. All that kind of stuff. That was quite the process. But the result was really, and we did a small inquiry afterwards. Everyone was had inspiration from each other, so everyone was very enthusiastic, both about the results and as well about the methods. So multiple people said we should use this method more, and not just regular participants as well. People from the board said, well, this is a really nice method. And everybody as well felt that the partnership that we already had for quite some years was strengthened. So there will be more small-scale cooperations in the different domains. And most concrete one was a minor program of 30 ECTS credits that will be offered as a shared minor. So having heard all this, I have a second poll for you, and that is, would you consider bench learning for your own organization? I try to make my presentation balanced on the pros and cons. So either I did not do a good work in that, or you're just very enthusiastic. If you want to talk further about it, then we can do that, of course, and there's multiple possibilities for that. One is, of course, right now, but you can always, of course, try to find me online in the lobby or in the networking sessions, or on, I don't know, make a meeting is possible in this platform, I guess. So it's really nice to see you this positive. A couple of people said it's too much hassle. I mean, to be honest, I can understand that. But it is worth it, I would say, in the end. So thanks for the poll. And then basically that was my presentation. So let's go to the questions you have, or just comments, or the dialogue. I'm curious to hear from you.
Thank you very much, Eltjo, for this presentation and this new format that we can decide to adopt or not. You gave a lot of information about how it worked, but before we go to the questions from the audience, can you maybe say a little bit about what came out of it for your institution? Concrete example maybe of what changed in that topic that you chose for this bench learning?
Well, so as I said, the most concrete example is that we are going to do a shared minor program. But more in general, I think it is awareness. This is typical a topic that I think most people, if you talk about it with people, then they realize, well, this is really important. This is actually our societal task, but on a day-to-day level, people are just busy doing running their education, their classes, their research, their whatever they're doing. So I think this was really good for people realizing what it is about actually we do in higher education. And the nice thing was as well that it was very much shared experience. So shared as in both teachers and education providers and researchers, but as well with the board. So it was very communal experiences. So within our institution, but of course as well together with the Turku people.
You do have a long-standing relationship with the Turku institution. To make the link, there is a question about how, what is a good strategy to pick the bench institution, but then we can make the link with Nicole's presentation before, where indeed there is a nice way of really trying to see in the partner institution all the different dimensions, obviously, or different services sometimes don't know that the next door service also has some relationship with that same institution. And what Nicole is doing is allowing us to have the global picture. So what do you think about that? What is for you a good strategy, and how could Nicole's approach help you?
Well, indeed, in the Finnish audit manual, they already say bench learning is best as a part of a long-term development partnership, and I really think that is true. I think that's a true observation. And the database, as Nicole presented it, so what I understood from that database is that it's very like factual, and has a lot of information. But I feel that this type of partnership in which you're both committed long term on development, and you can be honest with each other, because this is really important in this, for this type of learning, or for any learning, I guess. I'm not sure if that is visible in the database. So, I mean, I don't know how you can quantify that.
Yeah. Or maybe
if that is quantifiable.
If you see in your database that you do have maybe more contact and relationship than you thought, because
that is a signal, of course.
Maybe you don't know all of it. I don't know. Then maybe it would be a help to approach new partners for those kinds of things. Okay.
True, but as well, I mean, there were some things not completely clear from the database, which is for instance, I make contacts on a conference like this. So for instance, you and me talk, and I get to know you a bit, and you tell me a bit about your institution, and you give me inspiration. That type of contact, would that be in the database? Because it's a very like one-on-one. So
yeah, of course.
And so it appeared, and we didn't know that beforehand, actually. So as a preparatory group, we asked the participants. We, together with the preparatory group from Finland, we decided on the 4 topics, and to do to have education and research together in the domains, and then just internally we thought, okay, who is like open to this type of activity, and we asked some people, and by pure chance, people said, "Oh, that's really interesting," and I already have I did an activity with Turku, I don't know, 2 years ago or so.
Okay. And would you see, could you imagine using that format, that tool, for other types of topics? Like there is a question, for example, about preparation to study program or accreditation, something more into quality assurance. And are they topics that are more suitable for this type of format? Others not? Why? What is your view about that?
Yeah, my feeling is that it's the type of topics that would be useful are topics that you can really work a bit with. So if it's too strict of a topic, I think that's harder, because then there's just not so much to talk about. For instance, accreditation. I mean, usually it's a framework. You have to comply with the framework, and that's it. So that is
okay. In the sense that it's more like you should choose topics where you really have the possibility of a playground.
Yes.
Sort of.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I see.
So in the framework, the FINAC gives a couple of options, and they are for creating competence, which is very much on education, planning, implementation, evaluation of education. They have a potential topic on promoting impact and renewal, one on enhancing quality and well-being, which I think as well, the well-being part is a nice added like subtopic. So it's that kind of topics that are suggested by the Finnish.
Okay. Now, there is also a question about, I could almost say, in French we say la poule et l'œuf, so I don't know if in English you say the chicken and the egg, but from your experience, what is the biggest challenge when it comes to apply this method to establishing and strengthening a partnership? So in a way, it's good to use this method with partner institutions where you already have strong ties, but at the same time, this method could also be used to strengthen partnerships. So
yeah,
that's why I'm saying the chicken and the egg. It could be either or.
It's very very true. This type of activity definitely strengthens the relationship, and I mean there must be some fundamental trust. I guess you need to be open with each other, open about your own struggles and what is working. You need to identify good practices, of course, but as well very much you need to be able to realize and express the things where you're not working well on. So you cannot just listen to the other side's good practices, but as well very actively ask on the topics where you're not performing well or where you're struggling. So I think you have to have that baseline trust.
Okay, but then talking about trust, then you mentioned a lot of sharing experience, good practice, and all that. But did you also approach this exercise in a way of critical friend? So also allowing yourself on both sides to not only to reflect together, but also give maybe advice, or like if you were kind of also like in an accreditation setting, if you were like the experts and also giving some recommendations or things like that, or not at all?
Well, the advice was definitely in the second meeting where we delved deeper into the good practices that might be adopted and implemented. There, of course, we really talked on what would work and what would work in your situation, and so there was advice. On the other hand, it was done by the preparatory groups, where we tried to do a lot of basically work before, where we try to see on all kinds of subtopics what is happening in your institution as far as we know, and what is happening in our institution, and trying to question each other on what that is and what it means and how deep those things are going. So there we really tried in the preparatory work to identify like the most useful topics to go on about in the open learning setting.
Okay, and you did this exercise. You were invited by Turku. They were in the process of this accreditation. Would you do it again without this kind of invitation and without this? Okay, it is a requirement from the Finnish accreditation agency. Now that you've done it, do you want to repeat the exercise with another friend institution?
Well,
and if yes, on what topic?
Yeah.
How do you want now to continue with this new format? What do you want to do with it?
Well, we are already working on that.
Okay.
So this project or this trajectory came on my desk because they said, well, this has got to do with accreditation for the Finnish, so it's probably a quality assurance thing. So here it is. So I mean that was okay, and it was very nice to do it. As said, both the board and participants were very enthusiastic, and now we decided in our institution to go specifically on research. And to be honest, I'm not involved in that trajectory, but it is as well set up as a bench learning trajectory with one of our long-term partners on applied research, and I'm only involved as like an outside advisor because I did this trajectory. So I'm not exactly sure about the details, but we definitely said, well, this is a very useful way, so we're going to do that more often.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, you take that in your panels of tools as internal quality assurance with an external partner. Okay,
and I think we do this with one of our CARPA partners.
Okay, great. Thank you. Maybe I can invite Nicole back on the screen. Maybe you two actually have one question for the other also.
I do actually. My question is about partner selection. Also, I think some of the audience had questions about partner selection as well. When I was reading your paper, it looks like you really leaned in balancing similarities and differences. You really leaned towards trying to select an institution that had more similarities than differences, or where there were key similarities. And I wonder if that's what you did actually, and then what you would advise someone who's trying to implement bench learning. What advice would you give them about partner selection beyond the trust aspect in terms of deciding what kind of institution to partner with?
Well, I think that's, I mean, as said, it came to us, so we didn't have a very active partner selection here. But it's true that they're quite similar. We're a University of Applied Sciences, quite big, very broad, and I think it is. I think that is important to be roughly in the same. Well, you say that direction, or have more or less the same context we're working in.
Yeah,
I mean, that makes it easier to understand each other and to know what happens around you, even though if it's a different country and different context.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And you, Eltjo, did you have a question for Nicole?
Well, yeah, that's like I just said. I was wondering, so what type of data actually is included in the database? You said it's very coming from strategic level and from the international affairs department.
Yes.
But indeed, like I just gave the example, we're talking here now. I would say this is a form of a connection or a contact. Yeah. So how would that be visible in the database?
You're absolutely right about that. It's formal, what we call conventionné types of relationships. So there's some kind of official and institutional relationships. So things that are not included are these kinds of important but less tangible connections between people, and even informal contact that you have, which is, I mean, it's official in the sense that you're representing your university at this conference, but that's not going to show up in the data. And the other thing that people ask us for a lot that we don't have is they want things like international co-publications. These are essentially a form of individual relationship rather than institutional relationship. So on the research side, you see a lot of very important, very significant, but individual relationships that don't show up in this kind of data. These are institutional relationships that have some kind of official.
And something like guest lectures is as well too individual to show up. Or?
If there's some kind of trace of them in the human resources data, we have them. If they're just invited and they don't get paid, or they don't get their plane ticket reimbursed and there's no paper trail, then they don't show up.
Okay. Well, on that very pragmatic and practical note, I think we have to stop here. I really want to thank you both for being there, presenting your very interesting projects, and thank you to all the audience for joining and be active in the chat and in the Q&A tab. So